First of all, I have to say that the topic of from sensor to cloud is actually very important, and I believe it's a key topic. But when I look at the implementation, and I see a lot of it every day, it actually makes me a bit uneasy, because I have to say, the way our network structures are set up below the PLC, they're not future-oriented for this topic. Why? I'd like to briefly explain, because maybe we should put it differently. From the sensor through the PLC to the cloud, or even from the sensor through the edge gateway to the cloud. But what we're missing is direct access to the actual networks. Although I would also like to point out that when we talk about networks, they're not really networks at all. They're field buses. And that's actually something, when I look back, it's like it was in 1995. Back then, we brought Profibus to the market. We established field buses. And today, our so-called networks that are below the PLCs still have a similar structure. What disadvantage does that have? Quite simply, we just can't access the data that exists below the PLC. We have data treasures that we can't unlock. Maybe an example. A frequency converter, for instance, has so much important data that could be used for energy management. But these simply remain hidden from us because we have no access. And because the PLC, which we see as a data provider for higher level systems, doesn't have this data, since it doesn't need it for communication, so about 80% of the data that exists below the PLC remains hidden from us. Because we don't establish direct connectivity to this data. For that, we need a different network structure. At the moment, we're not doing that. We are in isolated, secure units, physically separated, and that's something we need to change. That's actually what concerns me a bit about this topic. It's actually obvious. We need to open up our structures below the PLC. We need to communicate with multiple PLCs. Today, the primary subject of our discussion is the transition from traditional field bus systems to a robust OT backbone. If this is possible with a highly suitable and well-designed infrastructure, proper in the sense of being exceptionally powerful and with comprehensive capabilities, the connection to higher level systems, and from that one connection at the bottom, we could actually make all those wonderful, valuable data accessible to us. That's really what I see now as what we should be doing. So a shift in thinking is needed, and opening up the barriers we currently have between networks, which are physical in nature, need to be transformed into virtual bridges that we can set up at any time. We can decide who is allowed to cross the bridge and who isn't. Yes, but it's virtual. It's not as rigid as a PN coupler is today, and that way we create connectivity. We enable seamless communication throughout, and I also believe that we don't have to give up the idea of security in the process. We will become more secure, more transparent, and we can organize much greater access to the data treasures below the PLC. So of course, Indu-Sol is first and foremost willing to start a conversation with customers. So the first way we support is, let's start a conversation. The second way we support is, let us contribute our know-how. That is important. And of course, ultimately, once we've had the conversation with the customer, we take certain first steps. We can't change the world overnight. First steps. And of course, what Indu-Sol offers, and maybe a quick glance to my right here, a modern infrastructure in the form of switches, and beyond that, planning support in the form of consulting. And of course, at the very end, we also have a service team that is there to possibly commission the networks, to take measurements, and naturally to install condition monitoring so that the network functions reliably and securely in the long term. So the overall security of the network, I would say, is effectively accomplished and maintained by opening up on one side, by significantly reinforcing the communication links below the PLC, but also by completely removing the requirement for a permanent connection upwards. Today we connect each PLC separately, providing connectivity to higher level systems. Moving on to the next PLC, we focus on ensuring connectivity to higher level management systems. Monitor independently, so much more monitoring effort is coming our way. That would be eliminated if we said there is only one access point, let's say to the SCADA system, to higher level systems, and we stay below. the programmable logic controller, or the PLC, would be the primary point of consideration here. When I'm utilizing a communication method such as the iDevice configuration, it is essential to determine exactly which specific data signals are successfully transmitted through the interface and which ones are not reaching their intended destination. When I use TCP/IP communication, I can specify exactly who should have access and who should not. So this can be organized very easily with this bridge, as we call it. Yes, and then of course we are a partner. If someone says, okay, Cyber Resilience Act, how can I organize that? How asset discovery can be organized below the PLC. There are software solutions and hardware solutions so that we can at least contribute a piece of the puzzle when companies in the future consider how to organize the Cyber Resilience Act, where asset discovery is indeed a component. So that's a really interesting question, AI. And if you look around our booth, you might actually miss the symbol for AI or artificial intelligence. Because I believe that today, within the network and its components, we still have a lot of possibilities to meet tomorrow's requirements, possibly even without AI. But where I do see a strong role for AI is in the planning of networks and in the question of how to monitor networks. And it's not out of the question that in the infrastructure of the future, we will have AI integrated, which might tell me in the future which path my data will take, or perhaps even manage bandwidth in an AI-controlled way. That's not out of the question. But I believe that today we have a future-oriented infrastructure that still leaves us with many, many possibilities to manage the data volumes of tomorrow, even without AI. But we have to design the networks accordingly, plan accordingly, so that we can manage the influx of data volumes and access. And this brings us back to the first question, so that we can actually grant access to the data sources as well.